The globe broke a new record on Monday for the hottest day ever recorded. But then that record was broke again on Tuesday. And although it happened on a holiday, it is absolutely nothing to be celebrating. So while most of America was enjoying hot dogs on the 4th of July, according to Common Dreams, on Tuesday, the global average temperature peaked at a new all-time high of 17.18 degrees Celsius as regions worldwide from Asia to Africa to the United States South reeled from dangerous heat waves. Now, millions of people across the globe were being put at risk, not only on Tuesday, but also Monday. As I said, both of these days were the hottest days ever recorded. And just to get a better idea of what that means, climate scientist Bill McGuire put out this tweet. Monday, July 3rd was the hottest day ever recorded on planet Earth, a record that lasted until Tuesday, July 4th, totally unprecedented and terrifying. So we can see in this graph, this global temperatures hit a new record, the change in the temperatures over time. And we'll get into some more about what's causing these rising temperatures. But Francesca, it's times like these where it's just so hard for me to fathom climate deniers, because at this point, if you live, I'm in Chicago, it's 90 degrees outside right now, which is not common for this time of year. It's hot, but it shouldn't be this hot. People can feel this happening and still not believe in it.
Absolutely, no, and they're told that if they do believe in it, that they're Democrats, and that this is somehow a partisan issue. But of course, behind closed doors, ultimately, they will all agree, and everyone will agree. It is getting hotter. It's just not politically convenient to admit that, but there's no denying it. And so it is in our faces. It is everywhere, and that's why we truly need to turn what is supposedly anger at environmentalists into anger at corporations for polluting and driving massive amounts of CO2 emissions, which is trapping the heat and ergo the insane climate that we are experiencing today, tomorrow, this entire summer, next year, and onward and so forth. And to say nothing of the wildfires and the natural or unnatural disasters. And truly, we need leadership. And sadly, even the smallest thing that the Biden administration attempts to do cannot get across the finish line. And yet, this is also a government that is too shook to do things like, rescind all the subsidies given to the fossil fuel industry. Let's see how they like that.
Exactly, and it's definitely not, a coincidence that the people disproportionately impacted by climate change and the climate disaster now are low-income people and people from the developing world, and we'll get into that in a minute. But first, I want to talk about what caused these conditions and how El Nino contributed to it. So Earth's hottest day, according to Common Dreams, came after World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, declared the onset of El Nino conditions, which are marked by warming surface waters in the Pacific. Now, the WMO Secretary General Petteri Talas said in a statement on Tuesday, in part, the onset of El Nino will greatly increase the likelihood of breaking temperature records and triggering more extreme heat in many parts of the world and in the ocean. The declaration of an El Nino by WMO is the signal to governments around the world to mobilize preparations to limit the impacts on our health, our ecosystems, and our economies. Now, these records are also hitting China particularly hard. According to Bloomberg, China is experiencing a scorching heat wave less than 2 weeks after temperatures broke records in Beijing. Extreme heat in India last month has been linked to deaths in some of the poorest regions. Last week saw a dangerous heat dome cover Texas and northern Mexico, while the UK baked in its hottest June on record. Now, Francesca, reading that line about governments need to mobilize to protect their citizens, I almost laughed because it's at the time when we're seeing Greg Abbott roll back protections for workers that just required them to have a 10-minute break every 4 hours if they're working in construction outside in these temperatures. And workers have died in the heat in Texas after that was passed. So just knowing how almost comically evil some of the response by government has been as far as protecting its citizens it's just really disconcerting.
No, and I think that you're speaking to exactly how the climate crisis is bearing down on everyday people, not just here, but in China. I mean, think of the number of factories there, right? Think of India, think of all the industry that propels global capitalism that rests on the shoulders of working people who are being, sweltered to death and not being compensated and not being given, things like air conditioning in, UPS trucks, which I guess is maybe something that they won in negotiations, we shall see, but also in Amazon warehouses, right? This is super basic that there isn't enough air conditioning and so on and so forth. And that I think is where we have to draw strength and hope from. We cannot just rely on the Biden administration or Greg Abbott of all people to do anything about this. We need to remember it's people power, international people power that is going to bring governments to heal, because we need government to act on the climate. There is no shortcut on this, y'all. Like, sadly, no matter what we do individually, which I think is important to remember to do things individually, but we need the mobilization, the money, the resources, the infrastructure of the government. And I think the last thing about China is, man, I wish the Biden administration weren't going in the opposite direction on this. Man, I wish they were not, ginning up more anti-China rhetoric and fear at a time when we need to come to the table to work on climate solutions with China and stop being like, oh, how come you have this stuff and we don't? You're stealing our job. No. We're beyond that. We're beyond that. And excuse me, until you get a light rail, America, you can sit the F down.
No, exactly. And I mean, it is sort of, as younger people looking at who is in charge of these countries, looking at Joe Biden, who, I mean, honest to God, I don't think he'll be around in 4 years, let alone decades from now. And, we have people like Dianne Feinstein, who just could not give a singular crap about protecting the environment for future generations. So it's disheartening, but I think you're exactly right. It's people power. It's us coming together, because if we don't, then the corporations are just going to steamroll us.